It's just a pleasure to be here, and I hope you're excited as I am. I think Juan's enthusiasm should be really continued through the rest of today. I'm here to talk about the patient voice, the patient and family voice, and really explain to you why in the next panel we're thinking about the family as well as the child in the way that we design medical devices. So I'm going to start here with what are the pediatric devices and equipment needs across the spectrum. I'm a pediatric researcher, a pediatrician who cares for kids with medical technology dependence and disabilities. So I'm really focused on the smaller group at the bottom. But we should take a step back and realize that what I'm about to talk about is really relevant for all children. One of the reasons I care deeply about the population that I'm focused on is because I really truly believe that their experience, which is one that's involved with all specialists, all elements and settings of the healthcare system, really sheds a light on the problems that all children have when they interact with the healthcare system. It's just magnified for kids who are constantly interacting with us. They also really reflect a lot of the pediatric healthcare costs. So children with complex medical needs and technology dependence, while they may only be about 1 to 5% of the population, are 50% of our inpatient healthcare bed days, 75% of our intensive care unit resources, and they're really the children who are in the ICU, wherever your devices might be used, inpatient, outpatient, and then are being transferred into the community. So I'll be using today and sharing with you some experiences that they have that I think, regardless of where your device might be across the ecosystem of pediatrics, should tell you about how we should be thinking about device design and development with the family voice in mind. Really, what Juan asked me to do is share the story of why we need to include patient and families in the work that we do across the spectrum. You can see, obviously, that we have it, whether it's protective equipment, whether it's syringes and medical supplies, whether it's administering our medicines, it's all relevant. In the work that we've done with qualitative interviews, focus groups, interviews, and photography with families, what we've really learned is the degree to which poor design impacts the patient and the family's life. We see outright malfunction, right? So when something loses power, clogs, when you're in the middle of using something, leaks, cracks, really significant. But we see and we hear about things like inaccurate dosing. When the medication pump doesn't get all the medicine there, you as a parent really worry, did my child get the full medicine? Did they get the full feed? So these are the things that are happening at home for our patients on a daily basis. We also hear about how I'm not sure about the accuracy of my pulse ox machine at the bedside, either as a clinical nurse or for us, for our patients and families in the home. What does that mean about whether I call that physician, whether I take my kid to the emergency room? If I can't have the confidence in the device, I'm going to worry about how my child is doing. Similarly, we hear about problems with rigid volume controls. If the volume is too loud, it keeps the parent up, they turn it off, they don't use it. That's a problem because you missed a safety alarm. Similarly, it's too soft. I can't hear it. I worry. I stay up all night. I worry I'm going to miss something that's important for my child. There's a lot of problems around proper fit for the patient, obviously, specifically for children who grow, right? And how often insurance is going to reimburse that device. But I think there's a lot of feedback we've received from families about fitting for the patient, right? For pediatrics, the family caregiver is also using this device. So to what degree in our design are we incorporating them into how it's used? Things that may seem simplistic, but are super important is how well can I clean this, right? Is it absorb fluid? I'm using it with a child who might be incontinent. To what degree, if it's sitting next to them, do I have to worry about being broken? How does it lack portability? We often are designing products now, initially for the clinical settings, but increasingly those products are being taken for medically technology dependent children into the home environment. What we found over the last decade is that now 30% of children who are admitted to children's hospitals have an implanted device in some part of their body, right? It's an increasing part of our patient population, and we need to be paying attention to how those devices are working from the hospital and outside. And who is going to give us those insights? Our patients and the families, and that's who we need to understand this from. Also, we see a lot about inadequate durability. So label smearing, battery life being insufficient. And some of those considerations are not just about safety, but they're about quality of life. The family being able to leave their home and go for a long enough, road trip to grandma's house. If you're worried that that battery is going to fail, you're going to be uncomfortable doing that sort of work. And then another thing to consider is the way it works in the home space. Another piece I want to add is how these things all work together. For many patients who have complex medical needs, they have more than one device. And so you may be, if in design, looking at the portability of a specific device, but are you thinking about how a patient who might be using a suction or a pulse ox is also using all these other devices that they have to carry with them and work together? So much of the design is understanding from patients and families how it will be used and what will happen with that use in a variety of settings. And the research that we've done have really showed that these device design inadequacies have impacts on the patient and also on the health system. So we see health harms, safety errors, infections. We talk about how it limits mobility of the child within the home, their ability to get around, but also to leave and go into the community. And we talk a lot, we hear a lot, about parental injury and stress, and the ways in which when these products don't work, often it's coming out of the family's own pocketbook, right, for their replacement parts. And there are meaningful healthcare system costs. So we know that there's a large amount of abandonment, particularly for the products that are not fitting caregivers, but also, of course, the child, the replacement and repair costs that are going through insurance. But also we know that 30% of emergency room visits for this population are due to device malfunctions and challenges at home, especially unnecessary or inaccurate readings that are happening in the home. And many times they lead to observational stays that are often not reimbursed. So there's also additional investments on the part of the healthcare system as a whole to want to see these problems fixed. And then lastly, we know that those lead to prolonged admissions when they lead to a health harm. So you're telling me about all these problems, like why, or what's it going to look like when I talk to the family? I think these pictures are really great examples of the ways in which families have actually been trying to address some of these problems in their own lives. And I hope motivate you to think about where we could be engaging patients and families upfront earlier, and usability and feasibility studies higher up in the stream so it's not getting to this point. So you can see on the left, we see a family trying to figure out how they're going to have their pump be adjustable in the case of their home by using basically a paintbrush pole that they got at a craft store. You can see families making homemade bed risers so that it can be at an ergonomic height for their ability to avoid their own injury. We have families making waterproof syringe labels to avoid errors because of ink wiping off of syringes, and you're seeing tapes, just basic taping of ventilator circuits, and literally takeout containers for leaking equipment that we just really don't want to be seeing for life-saving equipment in the home. I love to point out this last one because we see a lot of family engineers, and we'll have another one talking with us soon here in our next panel, making really incredible fixes for a lot of these issues. So there's a parent on Etsy who's selling a 3D printer wrench to help for the ways in which a feeding pump is not connecting very well, and families are having to use their teeth to open it. He's like, I'm going to create a solution for that, is selling it on Etsy. Well, I think we can all agree we would like to deal with that solution upfront from that, right? And see those addressed sooner if families were involved in those design activities. So that's much of what we're doing. So in our Health at Home initiative, what we're working on is trying to engage with those of you who are doing work in the device industry to, as well as app development and healthcare workflow optimization, to say we have patients who are eager and interested in sharing their stories. You will never find anyone more motivated than a parent of a child with a health condition and wanting to share their story and their experiences of how to improve a product that would improve their lives and their child's life. So I look forward to this next panel. I hope I've really made the case for why we need to listen to the patient voice, and we'll learn more next about how to do that.
We'll ask all of our panelists to join us.
And then,
Why don't you introduce everybody?
Okay. All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can we have another round of applause for our amazing speaker, Dr. Carolyn Foster? What a way to kick off our very first session this afternoon. And I'll admit I'm a bit biased, possibly the best session here with our patient engagement panel. My name is Melissa Bent, for those of you that I do not know, and I'm an orthopedic physician based out of Los Angeles, who's co-director of CTIP, along with the powerhouse team, Dr. Juan Espinoza and Dr. Yaniv Bar-Cohen. I'm honored to be moderating our all-star phenomenal all-female women panel here, and they will be sharing their perspectives on why you should value patient engagement and why it's a value add. Our panelists include Dr. Carolyn Foster, who you just heard from, who is tenured faculty here at Lurie, a pediatrician and scientist with numerous grants, and serves as the director of the Health at Home initiative. We have next to her on the right, seated is Melanie Tureen, and she is a senior design engineer at Fermi Labs, as well as mother of a child with a rare neurologic condition and stakeholder in parent support networks. Next, we have Michaela Jones, who is the manager of research operations at Smith Child Health Catalyst program here at Lurie. And joining us from the South is Leanne West, the president of the International Children's Advisory Network, or ICANN, and she serves as chief engineer of pediatric technology at Georgia Tech. And last but not least, joining us from afar, we'll get her up shortly, is Neda Hanafi, who is the co-founder of MedTech of Color, and she has served as the FDA CDRH senior scientist and health advisor. And so our goal at the end of the panel really is to change the conversation of patient engagement from end user to beginning partner and show what a value add input from patients and their families can make on your journey of pediatric medical devices through your design and development. So to start us off, in terms of why this is important, Melanie, given that this is a patient engagement panel, we would like to start with your lived experience to create a foundation for our talk. So can you tell us a little bit about your child's medical needs, as well as what your day-to-day life is like and the use of medical devices to support his health?
Sure. Maybe I'll just bring it closer because I'll probably throw it. Just leave it on the table. Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Turen. As she mentioned, I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I was actually living in Germany when our son Theo was born. So I have navigated the medical system in Europe and in the US. I believe that gives me kind of some unique insight into different ways of doing things. Our son Theo has PMD, which is freaking me out to keep seeing it on the screen. So you guys can all remember that. It's actually called Palacios-Meyersbacher disease. It's a leukodystrophy that affects his nervous system. He is globally delayed. He needs help with all activities of daily living. He requires constant engagement, constant monitoring, interventions. He gets medications every 2 hours through his feeding tube. He needs respiratory treatments every 4 hours. He needs monitoring at night. So one of us co-sleeps with him to make sure that he's okay in the evening and to give him actually medication in the middle of the night. Our daytime, even if we have help at home, which is rare, is also composed of indirect care, several hours every day, making food, making meds, cleaning equipment, prepping stuff, talking to doctors, just organizing things for just him to live his life every single day. He has a wide variety of medical devices. He has a GJ feeding tube, a feeding pump, pulse oximeter, suction machine, home oxygen, CPT vest. He's got a lot of stuff. And he also has mobility equipment. So he has a stander and a gait trainer and a wheelchair. So our house is kind of full of all different sorts of equipment and different devices. But these things are not only essential for his survival, which I don't think we should discount, but they're also what allow him to thrive and what allow him to interact with his environment and find joy every single day and smile every day for us. That's what's important for us, is we want to see our children smile.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Melanie, for that and sharing your personal experience and then walking us through what people don't see from the bedside in the hospital in terms of your day-to-day, in terms of home life. Can you take a few minutes to give us an example, either from your community or personal experience, in terms of an example of a parent and patient involved in the design of a medical device and how it improved?
Sure. So I thought a little bit about this, and I have an example of a device that I could tell the manufacturer listened to the patient. It's a suction machine, not exciting. Nobody loves their suction machine. We need them, necessary evil. And last year ours broke and we asked for a replacement while it was in the shop. And we got the newer version of the same model that we had. And I immediately noticed there were improvements. A lot of things are what you would expect to see from a Next of series. It was lighter, it was quieter. The battery life was days and not hours. But there were some other subtle changes that I really appreciated. They had rearranged where some of the buttons were so that you could charge it at the same time as you use it. They display that you could see what the pressure was and change it was much easier. And that kind of is a big deal if you have to change the pressure on the fly. But the most exciting thing was a little teeny tiny holder on the side where we could place the suction catheter after suctioning our child, and it would hold it upright so that we did not have secretions flying out everywhere. And that didn't improve the functionality. It didn't give a better technical specification, but it elevated my experience as a user of this device. And it really demonstrated to me that somebody was listening and somebody saw something that wasn't necessary for function, but was so beneficial for form and ease of use.
Thanks, Melanie. That is a fantastic example of, again, how even though you weren't involved directly with that, you as a parent could see that they were that the family was listened to in terms of making those changes and tweaks. So next, we want to go on to involving and giving you the tools in terms of how do you go about involving patients, particularly in clinical trials. So, Michaela, you involve patients not only in device design, but the research itself. And so what ways do you and your team engage patients and families in research and development methodology?
For sure. So I, like she mentioned, in a group called Catalyst. And one of the things that we try to do is work with investigators on the front end when thinking about their actual research project design and how can you bring in patients and families in every step of that research project. So one, kind of talking to investigators and learning about how they can bring the families and engage them in their research, but then also helping to bridge that gap between the investigator and the patient family and bringing those kind of two worlds together and making sure that the research speaks to the patients and families and they feel like they're invested and also want to participate to also have a great research study and make the changes that we all would love to see.
Great, thank you. And we're going to have Annetta, if you can unmute. I'm going to ask how your organization works to ensure engagement from patients from diverse backgrounds in medical technology and development.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, we
What
can
a great
hear you.
start to the conference. Awesome. So as part of MedTech Color, we have a collaborative community and it's focused on diversity and inclusion in product development and clinical research. So it's bringing the inclusion of the patient perspective, the patient centering in design thinking upstream. So there's the clinical piece, but if we haven't actually designed for the unique needs of patients upstream, it's going to limit the adoption piece, the compliance piece. Does it actually really work for patients? So we focus on how you can think about doing that. Having a patient advocate throughout the product device life cycle, including them and being intentional in terms of understanding what their unique needs are as you're developing that product and thinking beyond, Juan said it earlier, children are not little people, just as women are not little men. everybody has their unique needs. So bringing that voice to the table, and I think Dr. Carolyn said it best. It's not just the child. You have to account for the environment of use, the parents. So having that patient advocate throughout the product life cycle is something we work towards, and understanding how to do that in a streamlined manner for companies at all stages of their product development is really critical.
Great, thank you. So Leanne, can you give us an example of how this engagement has led to change or improvement in a particular device?
Yeah. So we actually do a lot of different things, and it's not always just a device, but we've definitely had our kids talk to developers like Biomodem, which is one of the CTIP company partners here, and get feedback about things that might seem like small changes, like an adjustment here or there, or maybe even adding another component like gaming to a device. But something that, they like something that makes it a little bit more fun, but also they want it to be functional for them. They don't want to worry about it not working for them. And so really just trying to listen to them and talk to the pediatric patient and not just their parent. That is really, really important. And both our parents and our children will tell you that. And so I think that really, and there's so many things too, like an MRI device, for example, we were giving feedback on, and, they wanted to know if they wanted to build like a pirate ship or, have flower stickers all over it or whatever it might be. And the kids came up with just a simple remote control that you can have to change the lighting in the room to one of like 4 colors. And that's because it gave them control over something in an environment that can be kind of scary, like an MRI. And so, even simple things like that. And another one, and this isn't a device, but I just love it, is we had researchers going in to look at how do I make a waiting room more interesting for kids. They're thinking games and virtual reality and fun colors and all of these things. And one of the patients, a 16-year-old girl, said, I don't really care what that's like. I just want a bathroom that I can throw up in private while she's having her chemotherapy. And the hospital that we're building in Atlanta actually made changes to the plan so that they could do that for their cancer patients. And so I think you can get inspiration from kids and families in all sorts of different ways. And we encourage co-creation and working with them from the very beginning, like has already been said, because they're so insightful and really just amazing every time I talk to them.
Thanks, Leanne, for those examples in terms of, again, the importance of not working in a silo, but again, collaboratively and partnering with patients and even kids can definitely give you some insights. Dr. Foster, as a physician who often acts as the intermediary between pediatric devices and patients and families with complex needs, how do you view your role in the patient engagement path?
Well, I also cheat a little bit because I have a research lab, but that focused on this. But certainly as a clinician, we do a lot of work brainstorming solutions to this, and then there's that piece that I have, right, of advocating at the systems level to bring those to attention. There's a lot of work that we do in trying to encourage patients and families to participate in councils and other boards, but also recognizing they do have a voice in industry. And then in the research that we do, every step along the way, we have a patient family advisor, and historically it was advisor, but increasingly we have advisors, right? Multiple perspectives of people. So I'm really proud of the last grant we just put in R21 to try to develop improvements in care for Down syndrome. And we have a COI with a parent of Down syndrome. We have an advisory board, and then we also have our participants, including teen participants, and making sure we have a patient voice. So I think you really should be thinking about family engagement potentially across the different elements of your work, right? You might actually be doing elements that are about, doing focus groups and surveys, but thinking about, gosh, do I want patients and families at other levels of the work that I'm doing? So embedding across different levels is part of what I do as a clinician and a researcher.
Great. Thank you for, again, merging those two roles. And especially, it's not just, this isn't a conversation that's being had across, nationally and internationally, especially in the research circles and getting patients engaged early in all types of research studies. So very timely. So as many of us know, there are oftentimes through the development process of a device that you may warrant input from families, and ideally continuous iterative feedback as opposed to a one-time survey. So Leanne, can you provide us with a framework of what partnership and survey design looks like and how go about obtaining feedback in the pediatric population?
Yeah, so at ICANN, what we're about is kids. Our members are kids age 8 to 18, and then young adults up to 29. And what we'll do is we'll talk with a company who might be interested in getting feedback from either the kids or the parents or both. We'll work with them to figure out what they're really trying to get at. We'll work with them to make sure that there aren't too many questions on the surveys and things like that, or make sure that they're at the appropriate reading level. And you might get kid feedback to begin with before you even hand out a survey from kids, the target kids, to say, are these questions, do they even make sense for what we're trying to figure out? Are they touching on things that matter to you that we want to try to fix? So we might get patient engagement to look at the questions, and then the survey will go out to the other kids to get more answers to the questions. And then it is an iterative process, exactly. So once we have that feedback, we'll give it to the company. If the company makes changes, they come back to ICANN. We like to show the kids how things were changed based on their input, because we think that's a really important part of the cycle and the iterative process, because people don't want to give their opinions and put in their time for something if they never know how it's going to turn out or if it was even used. And so it's really fun to take something back to our kids and they can see literally their exact comment was taken into account. And I think that's what makes kids and families want to keep doing things like that to help companies and researchers really understand what it's like to be them. But it is that back and forth iterative process, but keeping the patient involved the entire time. And again, starting from the very beginning, even if you're thinking about a protocol, for example, you could get people to review consent and assent forms. Are they going to understand what they're getting into so you can better keep people in the study? Are there things in there that are showstoppers, right? Like, is an 8-hour day at the hospital a showstopper for somebody participating in this event? And we found it was not in one case. But once you start doing too many visits, maybe 2 or 3 extra visits on what you think, they're okay with that, but you hit 5 or 10 and they're like, nope, I'm out. So anyway, there's so many things that you can get insights on to make it better for the people who do come through and do the study with you, and you're better able to maybe recruit and keep people in the study.
Thank you for that. And I think it's also, just to add on that, it's important to do this on the onset so
Yes.
that when you are trying to interpret your results, or why are we having issues with recruitment? Well, you're having, you're requiring 5 visits to the hospital. People have to take off from work and parking and all these types of things that it may not be successful, and you may not get the numbers that you need from a research purpose or other types of things that you're doing from a user experience perspective as well. Melanie, as a parent, what would you like companies to know when they're communicating with parents?
So I think what's important for us is kind of understanding the boundary conditions from the beginning. How much time is this going to take for us? How involved does our child need to be? So what you were saying, is it going to be 1 visit or 10 visits? That's a big impact for us. But also, how are we going to be communicating? Is this going to be via email? Can we do things remotely? Is there an app that we're going to use? How friendly are things? Keeping in mind that the more flexible things are, the more likely we are going to be able to participate in them, and our kids can participate in them. Of course, we want to know what the incentives are, and monetary compensation is, a big one. Many of us can't work because we're taking care of our kids, so any little extra help that we get is much appreciated. But as much as monetary compensation is important, so is this feedback that you were mentioning. We are passionate about this. We want to see that a complaint or a comment or a suggestion that we have was incorporated and see how it was incorporated. So come back to us. That has so much value to us and doesn't cost you anything as a company. Another one I thought I'd add in there is, can we keep the equipment if it happens to be a trial? Like, we would love if we find a product that we love, we want to hold on to it. We don't want to have to send it back to you. And that may not cost you anything to let us hold on to it afterwards. And the last thing that actually I didn't think of, I asked another medical mom about this, and she said, oh, I want to know if this is just some cursory FDA requirement that, we're going to do all this stuff and they're not even going to look at it, but it's going to be a check for them, or do they actually care about what it is that's going to make our lives easier, make our children's lives healthier and safer?
And no, thank you for all those pearls. I hope people are taking notes in terms of what families are looking for and how to go about, again, making, because I think another point is engendering trust and encouraging distrust by not having that open communication. So kind of in that vein, challenges can arise with anything. And so Neda, can you speak to an examples, particularly in terms of the importance of diverse perspectives and examples where things have gone awry and how MedTech Color and your experience in terms of how to resolve these issues?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you mentioned the word trust, and Leanne, I love the fact that you said going back to patients or to the children and showing them how you incorporated their feedback, which allows them to want to work with you further. But I think the trust aspect comes to play, especially with different racial and ethnic groups, where historically they have been underrepresented and marginalized, and have not seen the best outcomes when it comes to accessing or interacting with the healthcare system. So even when we're seeking feedback, one thing I would point out is who's providing the feedback? Do we have diverse and representative and inclusive folks at the table providing the feedback, and trying to seek out where there might be less feedback and being intentional again in doing that. I think there's many examples in the medical device space where we've seen worse outcomes for different racial and ethnic groups, or in different, in women, for example, compared to men. And we want to try and avoid that and be proactive in terms of creating these products that are really designed for those end users. So the diversity aspect, the representation piece, goes back to intentionality and making sure that you have culturally competent providers, as well as in the research system, folks that look like the communities you're trying to access and develop these technologies for, taking the environmental needs, social economic status into place. You mentioned about, am I using an app? Do I actually have a phone that allows me to easily access the app? Do I have consistent internet access? And kind of really understanding what those unique needs of accessing and participating in this research will look like, and then having it developed in a way that allows them to participate effectively, I think is so critical. So everybody's so unique and different. And if we as a research community takes that into account when we're developing our processes and our procedures, policies, it will allow for a better outcome here.
Thank you, Neda, for that. And again, underscoring the importance of why representation matters, especially along the device development pathway for children. Michaela, can you speak to the challenges that you have, at least from a research and budgeting standpoint, particularly going from small to large research focus groups?
Yes. So this is an area too where, like, of course, we would love to get a lot of information from as many people as we can, but when the budget doesn't allow for that, what can we do? And I think this goes back to the community engagement piece. So if we're only able to, say, talk to 2 focus groups about this wonderful device that we have, we want to make sure that, one, our questions that we're asking in that in that focus group have hopefully been reviewed by our community engaged folks that have been helping us with the research project along the way. So one, we're asking really intentional questions to this small group of people that we have, and then going back to the other point, making sure that who we're recruiting in our research studies and who are being asked the questions are also as representative as possible of the people that we hopefully want this device or research study to help. So kind of coming at it from both ends and making sure that we're being intentional not only with what we're asking of participants, but also that the participants themselves are representative. And even if we can only do that with a small group, it's still very impactful to do that.
Great, thank you. Because a lot of people, we think you have to go big to go home, and that's not necessarily the case. Leanne, through ICANN, can you discuss some challenges that you have encountered in the space in terms of asking patients and families to participate?
Yeah. So patients and families, we have to remember that they are people and they have normal lives, just like everybody else, to the extent that they can. And so, one of the things is our kids will tell you, don't, if you can make it where I don't have to miss school because I've already missed so much school, then that would be great. So they even said for the 8-hour example I gave a minute ago, they're like, if that could be on a Monday holiday or something, that would really work out for me. They don't want to miss activities with their friends after school or on the weekend. And so really just trying to take into account them as people first and really trying to understand and get to know them on that level. And I'll just throw out one other thing too. One of our parents had a child in the NICU, and a lady who was recruiting for a study was talking to the people as they were diagnosed, but she didn't talk to everybody. And so this mother, when her child was diagnosed, that lady swooped in almost immediately to be like, hey, do you want to sign up for this clinical trial? And the mom is like, hold on, I'm just now starting to process this. I don't even know what any of this means. And so I think that there's a level of, again, kind of being a decent human being. And she's like, it would have helped if she had said hi to me that whole week we were on the floor together, but she never once talked to me until like the minute my child was diagnosed. And so I think that there are just boundaries there that you need to think about and be aware of. And again, some of it just comes down to, thinking about them as a human being first, as opposed to a test subject. Our kids will tell you they don't like being called a subject or participant necessarily. When they're looking at a consent or assent form, they're like, I'm a person, and they want to be considered a person first. And so you just have to remember that.
Thank you, Leanne, for those points. Definitely in terms of, again, we're working with the pediatric population. So again, like the first thing you said about school schedules and all that is super important. So as we are almost at time with wrapping up this formal part of the panel, I would like, since Melanie opened us up, I'm going to have her actually close us out with her takeaway points that we would like on behalf of this panel companies to consider when engaging with patients and their families in device development.
I have 5, but they're fast. So my first point is we are engaged. You're not going to find a group of people that are more passionate about or committed to testing a device, giving you feedback, seeing improvements than parents and caregivers that are literally using these devices to keep our children alive. My second point is that we are resourceful. As I said, these devices have to work, but sometimes they don't always work as intended or for our specific needs. So we get very creative on how to adapt them. They're usually not elegant, but they're almost always inexpensive and they're almost always effective. So let us inspire you with our MacGyverness. The third point is we are diverse. I think that health or lack thereof is one of the great equalizers. Illness doesn't discriminate on gender, social class. Everybody can be affected by this. And that means that the patients and the caregivers are also very diverse. We have different backgrounds, we have different needs, and we have different abilities. And this takes me into point 4, which is that we are real. We are real people with real problems. I believe that testing devices in a hospital setting with trained professionals is definitely beneficial and needs to be part of the process. But what it is missing is just the unpredictability of everyday life, of actually leaving the controlled environment, taking this out into the community, taking this into our home, being the only person awake at 2 a.m. when your child is having a medical emergency. And this device needs to work. It needs to be intuitive. So we can help you to identify unmet needs, things that you don't even know are a problem, and improve your products from the beginning to better suit our community. And my last point is that we talk. If you want to sell more product, make more money, make something that we love. We are going to tell our kids' therapists about it. We're going to tell their doctors about it. We're going to call the DME and say, hey, can you order some of these because this was awesome? And we're going to tell other parents about it who are then going to ask their DMEs and their doctors. And, alternatively, if we don't like something, we're going to be just as loud at, complaining about it and telling people don't ask for that product. So we may be small individually, but together we have a loud voice. We are mighty. So listen very carefully to what we have to tell you and engage us from the very beginning, because that's what's going to make the best product that suits our community the best.
Great. All right. I know we are at time, so I want to again thank our panelists and audience for your attention and engagement. For more information, please feel free to reach out to our panelists either individually or stopping by their respective tables in the exhibition hall. And I think in terms of, we'll move forward to the next panel and no Q&A. Thank you.